live here in the Stephen King Rules Dollar Baby Film Fest. And yeah, we are on day 3 and we are in the home stretch, folks. um, Coming up next, right now, we have Stephen King Universe royalty, a legend in his own, and also in the Stephen King world, famed author uh, Bev Vincent is here, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, Bev, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine, thanks. Can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Perfect, great.
Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I'm really glad to be here too. I'm James, everybody.
Hey, James.
Very nice to hear you, Bev.
Good to see you.
Most everybody knows I've been doing the tech this weekend to better and worse effects, but I couldn't resist coming out and chatting with Anthony and Bev, because Bev is not only one of my favorite authors, but he is one of my favorite human beings in the entire world. So I just wanted to say thank you for once again joining us here on Stephen King Rules.
It's hard to believe that you said it's been a year. It's been a little bit over a year. It seems like a lot longer because so much has happened in the past year.
That is very true. That is very true. And it's nice to be able to be getting back into some public gatherings as well as our online offerings here. And we're just so happy to have you. Just maybe I just wanted to start with the question. Just to give a little refresher to the people who are watching here today, can you just sort of let us know about kind of what brought you into the Stephen King universe and things that you've done?
So I started reading King in '79, quickly became an addict. During the 1990s, when the internet was starting, I joined the Usenet news group alt.books.stephenking, which was really, really active. Met a lot of great people. Maybe some of them are even here today. Some of the older ones like me. Rich Chismar approached me in 2001 and asked me if I'd write a column for Cemetery Dance. That's King news and reviews and commentary. So I've been doing that ever since 2001. In a couple of years later, I had the idea to write a book called The Road to the Dark Tower, which came out in 2004, which is still in print, which I'm very happy about. A few years after that, Barnes & Noble approached a company to ask for a Stephen King Reader's Companion, and the publisher approached me and asked if I'd write that, and that became the Stephen King Illustrated Companion. I've done some other stuff along the way. News from the Dead Zone is also online at the Cemetery Dance website, so we're keeping up the news and reviews. I just finished writing my review of Fairy Tale that'll go up in a couple of weeks. And then I've got a new book coming out. Presumably it's going to be September 13th, but the date keeps bouncing around a little bit, which is an expanded version of the Stephen King Illustrated Companion that covers all of his books instead of just a select few, along with some neat little trips down the road into places like Castle Rock and Derry and all sorts of interesting sidebars. It's about twice as long as the previous book, and it'll be available everywhere, which I'm really thrilled about because the original one was only available in the United States in Barnes & Noble.
And congratulations on that new book, Bev. We're all going to be looking forward to that for sure. I'm curious as to when you do a book like that, there's such a wide, long list of works by King. How long does it take to do all that research and get all that information together like that? Because he has 50 years of writing under his belt. So how do you start on something such massive?
Fortunately, I've been very organized over the years. I have file drawers full of interviews and reviews and essays and everything else, most of which I've digitized in the recent years. So when I want to write about a particular book, I can just do a quick scan of my PDFs and find all the places where King has talked about that book. So the original one, Stephen King Illustrated Companion, because of a limited both time frame and page count, I only talked about maybe 10 or 11 books that spanned his career. That one, I was able to write the first draft of the text of that one in about 6 weeks. purely because I had everything I needed on hand. For this expanded edition, probably spent about 2 or 3 months on this one because, like I said, I don't cover all the books in the same detail that I did in the King Illustrated Companion, but I do cover them all to some depth. I'm happy to be able to get back into some of the ones that weren't even mentioned, like some of the ones from the 1990s, like Gerald's Game and Rose Madder and things like that. So yeah, I've just got all sorts of things digitized, which really make my life easier.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so also I thought it's worth mentioning that, like Norm, Leah, and myself, and a number of our Dollar Baby filmmakers, you're Canadian.
I am indeed.
Originally. Woo! And you're from the East Coast of Canada. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like growing up, and sort of what drew you to writing in the first place?
So I grew up in New Brunswick, which is the state that's attached to the side of Maine. When I was a kid, we used to go camping in Maine quite often. Bangor was one of our favorite places to go because it had the sorts of shopping that wasn't available to us in Canada. So yeah, so I've known Maine all my life. I went to university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is like way out on the East Coast, sort of dangling off in the Atlantic. I discovered King in my first year in Halifax. I picked up Salem's Lot in a used bookstore, and I felt at home reading his books straight off because I knew that, the small town life. I grew up in a very small town, like village, less than 1,000 people. And when I discovered Salem's Lot, I immediately went back and read everything else he'd written, which in 1979 wasn't very much. But I was really taken by Night Shift. The short stories really captivated me. And I started writing, when I was in college, short stories that were very much in the vein of Night Shift. And I never did anything with them except I read them to my friends in dorm. But that was really my toes dipped into the water on writing in about 83 or thereabouts.
That's fantastic.
That's
A good place to start.
Yeah, it is. Bev, I was wanting to ask you. You are one of the known scholars, as I like to phrase it, of the Stephen King universe, along with folks like Robin Firth and Stephen Spignesi. How does that make you feel that people reference you and buy your books to learn more about King, to go past the book? How does that make you feel when readers go to that point in their fandom, when they want to they want to start learning more about King like that? They start buying books like you and Stephen Spignesi's book. I'll get it out.
Steve Spignesi's first book, it was called The Shape Under the Sheet. It was the Stephen King Encyclopedia. And basically it was a list of every character and every town and every item. And it was just massive, comprehensive. And that's what I used to rely on extensively in the 1990s on the used groups. And people say, what was the name of that guy in that book who did this? And I'd page through and I'd have the answer. And it made me look like I knew a whole lot more than I really, really did. So I'm quite happy when people read my books. Obviously that's what I wrote them for, is for the fans to read them. And I'm especially gratified when people reach out in one way or another just to say that they've enjoyed something, because we all read so many books, and how often do we think to let the author know that we've enjoyed something? So when somebody takes the time to either tweet at me or send me an email or something like that, it means a lot. It means that I'm not just shouting in the darkness, that there's an audience out there who likes what I'm doing.
That's wonderful.
That's fantastic. Well, so you were obviously a Stephen King academic, but we all know as well that you were a writer in your own right. I've read a number of your short stories and have been very, very happy to. As you know, specifically, Zombies on a Plane is my particular favorite right now. But I was wondering if you could tell us what your favorite story of yours is, and maybe give our audience a little bit of a summary of what the story contains.
Okay, so I would say probably it's the longest piece of fiction that I've had published to date. And it's a novella actually, called The Dead of Winter. And it's in a book called Dissonant Harmonies that Brian Keene and I did. And the idea behind it was that Brian and I have known each other forever, and we're always talking about music when we get together. And we have some musical overlap, and we have some places where we go completely off in different directions. And so we each created a playlist for the other person to listen to while we each wrote our own novella. Not necessarily that we would be inspired by the lyrics or the music. That would just be the only thing we would listen to, and it just keeps playing constantly in the background while we're writing. And so The Dead of Winter is sort of my homage to the Hardy Boys in a sense. The two main characters are Frank and Joe. They're a little bit older than the Hardy Boys. Frank has gone off and, he's not Frank Hardy, but he's sort of like my tribute to him. Frank has gone off and become a policeman. Joe has stayed behind in town and just sort of not made much of himself. He likes to drink and he does some drugs, and there's a little bit of a Hunter S. Thompson influence in the way the book opens, because Joey's high, Joey's high as a kite when the story opens. But it takes place during the winter, when people keep disappearing in this small town, one a month for about 3 months during the winter months. And one of them happens to be a former girlfriend of Frank's, and Frank is called back by the girl's mother to investigate. And so the two of them are sort of thrust back together, and it's a little bit of a reverse biblical story. The good son is the one who went away, and the bad one is the one who stayed behind, and they've got some history between them. But it's a sheer horror story set during a massive blizzard that just shuts everything down. And I really love how it turned out. I'm trying to get up the energy and inspiration to do a second book that's going to be called Dead of Night, which will be another Dissonant Harmonies collaboration with Brian and me.
Well, that's
Very
great,
cool.
very cool. Bev, you mentioned name Joe. So we all know that Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. And in the fan pages and the fans that are out there watching and so forth, they feel that Joe Hill is his dad's son. I mean, he's got some big shoes to fill. How do you feel about Joe Hill's work, especially with the success of Black Phone movie that came out this summer? Joe's definitely going up the ladder. How do you feel about Joe Hill and his work?
I discovered Joe before people knew who he was. I read his short story collection when it came out under Joe Hill, 20th Century Ghosts. And I thought at the time that it was the best debut short story collection that I'd ever read. That collection is chocked full of just so many hit the ball out of the park sort of home run stories. And I've followed along with him ever since. And I haven't seen the adaptations yet, most of them. I'm still waiting to dip my toes into Lock and Key. I've read a couple of his shorter graphic novel collections. There's a few 3 and 4 and 5 episode graphic novels. I've listened to the audiobook narration of Lock and Key, so I've got an idea of what the big picture is. But you don't want to put any pressure on somebody, but I wish he would write more novels faster, because
we all do.
If he was like his dad, he'd be cranking them out a little bit quicker than he is. But I always enjoy them, and I've met him a couple of times. I had the privilege to interview him at the World Horror Convention in San Antonio back in what must have been 2010. He was at Nikon with us one year, so we just got to hang out with everybody. And so I like his stuff a lot, and I think the kid's got great promise, if we'll say that.
You can go far. You can go far.
So, Bev, again, for people who watched last year and a bit ago, and people who know you, they'll know that you, the other half of your life involves a lot of science, and I want, given that we were talking with Jackie Perez the other day, and her declaration that she likes to use a lot of STEM research and or just STEM themes within her. She did Beach World, of course, within her films. I just wonder how much your science background affects your writing, and do you purposely try to bring some of that education into some of your work?
For the most part, I would have to say no. For a long time, I kept a pretty big wall between my day job and my writing. So, but I have let it leak through a little bit. I've written some very scientific based stories. I've published some science fiction and some science fact essays and stories. I just submitted a story before we came on here. It's probably the 20th time it's gone out the door, so it's not finding any winners quite yet. But it's a robotics story. I do really, I think at some point, want to embrace the science a little bit more. Like Isaac Asimov is somebody who I revere for the way he was able to bring real science, accurate science, into his work. And maybe most people don't know this, but most of the stuff that I've been writing these days is crime fiction. And Asimov wrote some great crime stories. One in particular, and I can't remember the name of the novel right offhand, but it involved an exploding liquid nitrogen tank. And the reason that somebody rigged it to explode, and the way that he set that all up was pure science, absolutely accurate stuff. Of course, he went on into like the robotics end of things in a lot of his stuff, which was also science-based, although a little bit more fantastic. But yeah, I do think I've got a lot of scientific stuff that I could leverage in the future, definitely.
Okay. Bev, I want to ask you a question about the Dollar Baby film themselves. You actually were part of one long time ago. Correct me. The title Gotham Cafe, I believe, was the title.
Stephen King's Gotham Cafe.
Oh,
we got to do
that.
that. Stephen King's Gotham Cafe, and I see in the chat sidebar that there's at least one person here on the chat who worked on that project as well. Leanne.
Oh, yeah, right on. Welcome.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask was that that was a long time ago. Watching the festival this weekend and looking at these wonderful films, how do you feel that the Dollar Babies have changed, since when you first started that one, when you were part of it, to today? I mean, does it blow your mind that what these makers are doing with Stephen King's works?
Well, I mean, people can do things nowadays on a cell phone that anybody back in the 90s and early 2000s could only dream of. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the budgets that are sometimes available, not always available, but sometimes available to the current filmmakers is quite nice. It gives them some ability to really expand. I mean, I have to say, and this isn't just because he's sitting there. I mean, James's adaptation of the Doctor's Case, I have watched that one at least 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And it's always just, I'm always so impressed by it, because in part because I'm a Sherlock Holmes fan. I have published one Sherlock Holmes short story, and I've read all of the Holmes stuff many times, and I just love what he did with that. And the people he got to work on that, with Denise Crosby and the guy from the X-Files. I mean, but just the production quality and everything is just so good. So when I look back at what we did with Gotham Cafe, there's some really good stuff in that. I think the actor that they got to play Guy, the crazy maitre d', you couldn't cast anybody better than him. He was just perfection. The special effects were what we could do at the time. Yeah, I'm sorry that movie can't be shown anymore because of some rights limitations, but I think it turned out pretty well. And we got Stephen King to do a voice cameo.
Yeah.
So we've got that to go. He plays the lawyer who phones into the main character and talks to him at one point.
Awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, Bev, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev, for being here.
It's been so great to chat with you again, and thank you, Anthony, for having this conversation with us. We have another movie that's coming up next, and Anthony will be the one to introduce that, or Leah will come and take this microphone so I can go over and press play.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Bev. It was great to talk
Thank you, Bev,
to
for
you.
being here.